I turned 18 on a quiet Tuesday. No party. No candles. Just a grocery store cake on the kitchen counter and a folded piece of paper next to it, neatly labeled with my name and my dad's handwriting. I opened it, expecting a birthday card. Instead, it was an invoice. $600 due on the 1st of every month. Rent. My rent. You're an adult now, my mom said without even looking up from her phone. Time to pull your weight. I stood there in disbelief, holding that piece of paper while my older brother was still asleep upstairs in the room he never paid for. My sister? She was on a beach in Florida, on a trip they funded. And me? I was the one being told to start paying or move out. Daniel, my brother, was 26 and still living at home. Not working. Not paying. Not even pretending. Sophia, my sister, was 24 and had moved out, sure, but only after our parents helped her furnish her apartment and co-sign the lease. She still came by every weekend to raid the fridge and do her laundry. Nobody handed them a bill. Nobody questioned their value. But the minute I legally became an adult, I stopped being a son and became a tenant. Not even a conversation, just a price tag where love was supposed to be. I wanted to say something. Ask if they were serious. Ask why. But I just stood there, silent, heart pounding, throat tight. I don't even remember eating the cake. I do remember going back to my room and staring at the walls, wondering what I'd done wrong, what made me less worthy of being cared for. That night, I didn't cry. I packed. Not because I was ready, but because I finally understood this was never my home. It was just the place I paid rent to survive in. And if this hit you even a little, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to hear your story. Like, share, and subscribe, because strength like this, it deserves to be seen. I used to think maybe I'd been born into the wrong family. Not because they were cruel, not exactly. But because, somehow, I was always on the outside looking in, even when I was right there in the room. I was the third child, the quiet one, the easy kid. I didn't throw tantrums. I didn't need special attention. I just existed. And in a house where noise meant love and chaos meant presence, my silence made me invisible. I got good at staying out of the way, good at not expecting much. Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking for anything at all. My parents had 3 kids, but only 2 ever really seemed to count. Daniel was the oldest, the golden boy. Charismatic, outgoing, always the center of attention. Sophia came next, their surprise baby after a miscarriage that nearly broke them. My mom called her our second chance. And me? I was the youngest, the we didn't plan for him kid. I wasn't abused. I wasn't mistreated. I was just overlooked. Like furniture, useful, dependable, and easy to forget. Daniel was a walking spotlight. He could crash a car or flunk out of college and still come home to praise and sympathy. He's just figuring things out, my dad would say. Sophia was the princess. Fragile, sweet, and shielded from every hardship. When she caught a cold, it was like the whole house went into quarantine mode. But when I broke my arm at 10 falling off a neighbor's trampoline, my mom barely looked up from her laptop and said, "Guess that's what you get for being reckless." By 12, I knew how to do my own laundry. By 13, I'd figured out how to make dinner for 3 because mom worked late and dad didn't cook. I didn't mind, not at first. I liked feeling useful. But that usefulness turned into expectation. I became the one who cleaned up, the one who stayed out of trouble, the one who didn't ask for rides or favors or new shoes until mine had holes in them. And no one noticed, because I never complained. That's the thing about being quiet, you learn to suffer in a way that looks like maturity. What hurt most wasn't what they gave Daniel or Sophia. It was how naturally they forgot me. When my science project won a regional competition in 8th grade, no one showed up to see me present. When I made the JV soccer team in high school, my dad asked, "Is that the one with the helmets?" Every little moment that should have been something turned into nothing. And after a while, I stopped telling them about my wins. I stopped hoping they'd care. I just buried the hurt, turned it into drive, and decided that if I couldn't be seen for who I was, then I'd make myself impossible to ignore. Not through yelling. Not through rebellion. Through success. Quiet, focused, undeniable success. On my 18th birthday, I didn't get a speech about becoming a man. I got a payment schedule. My mom slid it across the table like it was a normal part of growing up, like this was just how things worked in our family. Rent was due on the 1st. Groceries were optional, but if I planned on eating the food in the fridge, I'd need to contribute. I wasn't shocked, exactly. More hollow. I nodded, said okay, and tried not to show anything. They didn't ask me if I was okay with it. They didn't even look up. I just took the paper and went back to my room. There wasn't a conversation. Just a transaction. And after 18 years in that house, that moment confirmed what I'd always suspected: I wasn't family. I was staff. Daniel never got a rent sheet. He was still living at home, still sleeping in until noon, still raiding the fridge like a teenager. He hadn't held a job for more than a few months, but that never seemed to matter. Mom said he was just trying to find his passion. Sophia had moved out a year earlier, but not without help. My parents covered her first 6 months of rent, bought her furniture, and filled her fridge with starter groceries. They even gave her one of their credit cards for emergencies. I, on the other hand, was expected to pay rent while sharing a wall with a brother who spent most of his time watching YouTube and complaining about his back. The difference was loud, but no one said a word. I didn't argue. I didn't throw the paper back or raise my voice. I just looked around my room, my posters, my books, the old dresser I'd refinished myself, and realized I didn't belong there anymore. Maybe I never had. That night, I started packing. Quietly. No drama, no fight. I didn't even tell them I was leaving until the week after. I found a friend who let me crash in his garage for a while. It smelled like oil and cold metal, but for the first time in my life, I felt something close to peace. I wasn't their problem anymore. And finally, they weren't mine. The garage wasn't glamorous: concrete floor, a single overhead bulb, and a mattress wedged between old bikes and dusty storage bins, but it was mine. No one slammed doors. No one handed me invoices. My buddy Zach's parents didn't say much, just gave me a nod and let me stay. I picked up shifts at a local cafe and started saving what I could. It was cold at night, especially in winter, but I'd never felt warmer inside. For once, I could breathe. I could think. And most of all, I could stop pretending like living at home had ever meant safety. A month later, I found out what my parents had told the rest of the family. My aunt called, concerned, asking why I'd stormed out and cut ties. She said my mom had been heartbroken, telling everyone I'd left in anger, that I didn't want their help, and that they were just giving me space to figure things out. I was stunned. That wasn't just bending the truth, it was flipping it upside down. They made it sound like they'd offered support, and I'd thrown it back in their faces. There was no mention of the rent demand. No mention of the conditions. Just a curated version of events to make them look like victims. The betrayal hit harder than I expected. I could have handled them being cold, being unfair. But lying? Rewriting the story to protect their image while painting me as ungrateful? That hurt. That wasn't just forgetting me, it was turning me into someone I wasn't. They weren't just neglecting me anymore, they were reshaping me into a villain for the sake of appearances. I sat on the edge of the mattress that night, phone buzzing with messages I didn't want to read, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't disappointment anymore. It was something colder. From that point on, I knew I was no longer part of their narrative, at least not as myself. I was the scapegoat now. The kid who left on his own. The one who didn't want to be part of the family. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a story that didn't stain the pedestal they'd built for Daniel and Sophia. And if that meant erasing me completely, then so be it. I stopped waiting for them to reach out. I stopped expecting anything. I'd been written out, and maybe that was the only honest part of our relationship. The next 2 years were a blur of burnt coffee, late-night study sessions, and learning how to survive on 5 hours of sleep. I juggled 3 part-time jobs, barista in the mornings, delivery driver in the evenings, tutoring high school kids on weekends. I lived off dollar menu burgers and instant noodles, memorized bus routes to avoid paying for gas, and studied under fluorescent lights in public libraries because I couldn't focus in the cold garage. There were nights I passed out in my clothes, textbook open on my chest, alarms set for shifts I prayed I'd make on time. I was exhausted, constantly on edge, but I was free. That mattered more than anything. When I finally earned a full-ride scholarship to a state university, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. I accepted the award in a wrinkled thrift store blazer, smiled for a photo that no one in my family would ever see, and walked back to the bus stop with a crumpled acceptance letter in my pocket. No hugs. No phone calls. No celebration. I didn't even tell them. What was the point? I had learned not to offer good news where it wouldn't be received. So I packed my things, moved into a cramped dorm, and started a new life without ever looking back. Graduation came 3 years later. Honors cords around my neck, job offer in my inbox, and my name echoing across the stadium speakers. I scanned the crowd, rows of parents clutching flowers, siblings cheering, phones waving in the air, and found no familiar faces. Just empty seats where my family should have been. I stood there, diploma in hand, and clapped for myself. No one else was going to. People assume the moment you make it, the pain disappears. It doesn't. It just gets quieter, more private. But standing on that stage, I wasn't sad. I wasn't even bitter. I was proud. I had built something from nothing. And not a single person could take that from me. I moved to Denver with 2 suitcases and enough savings to cover 1 month's rent. I found a tiny studio apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, but it was mine. I landed my first job in IT support at a mid-sized firm and worked like I had something to prove, which I did. Promotions came faster than expected. I earned the respect of my team, got certified in cybersecurity, and before long, was managing my own department. I bought a new car, used, but reliable. I paid off my student loans. Eventually, I bought a condo just outside the city. Nothing flashy. Just something that said, I made it. I wanted to send my parents a photo of the keys. I didn't. They hadn't earned that moment. It belonged to me. It had been a while since I'd seen my parents, but when my dad called out of the blue asking for help with some computer stuff, I agreed. Part of me wanted to say no, most of me, really, but I was in town for work and figured one awkward afternoon wouldn't kill me. I showed up at the house I used to call home, sat at the same old kitchen table where they handed me a rent invoice, and opened up his laptop. Bills, scanned receipts, some tax forms. Routine stuff. Then I saw a folder labeled estate documents. Something made me click. There it was, last will and testament. My fingers hovered over the trackpad for a second before I opened the file. I told myself it was just curiosity, that I had a right to know. But the second my eyes hit the words, my stomach dropped. The house. The savings. The retirement accounts. The car. Even the antique watch collection from my grandfather, everything was listed neatly, assigned with care. And all of it was going to Daniel and Sophia. My name wasn't there. Not even once. Not in a footnote. Not in a single clause. They'd left the entire estate to the same people who'd never paid rent, never held down a job, never showed up for anything but dinner and handouts. Daniel would get the house, the very one I had once helped pay the mortgage on back when they were tight. Sophia would get the lake cabin, which I didn't even know they still owned. Every account, every belonging, every ounce of legacy, they handed it all over without a second of hesitation. And me? I wasn't a son. I was a ghost. A line they'd deleted from their future. It was surreal, sitting there, hearing the low hum of the refrigerator, smelling the familiar hint of lemon cleaner in the air, like nothing had changed. But everything had. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall for what felt like an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat in silence, heart pounding in my chest, trying to process how people could be so deliberate in their disregard. You always wonder if you're imagining the favoritism. If you're being dramatic. But a will? That's black and white. That's the truth with a signature on it. I couldn't get the will out of my head. For days, it haunted me. Not just the contents, but the cold, calculated way they had written me out of the story. I kept wondering, had this always been the plan? Or was it a recent decision, something they made after I left? I started digging. Not out of anger, but from a need to understand. I requested some old financial records under my name from when I helped pay off parts of their mortgage. One thing led to another, and before long, I was staring at documents that didn't quite line up, missing transactions, closed accounts, discrepancies buried under vague labels like family support. That's when I stumbled across something I wasn't supposed to see. My grandfather, my dad's dad, had left behind a trust fund before he passed. I remembered him vaguely, a stern but kind man who used to sneak me peppermint candy when my parents weren't looking. He died when I was in high school, and no one ever talked much about what he left behind. Turns out, he'd built a modest fortune from land sales and long-term investments. In his original trust documents, he had written explicit instructions. The money was to be split evenly among his grandchildren, all three of us. Daniel, Sophia, and me. But when I looked at the current records, the account had been fully liquidated 3 years ago. The money was gone. Completely drained. Every last cent. And it didn't take long to see where it went. Daniel had started a business right around the same time, a tech startup that flopped before it even got off the ground. My parents had funneled every dollar of my share into keeping his disaster afloat, hoping it would turn into something. They never told me. Never asked. Just took it. Just like they took my place in the family narrative and gave it to someone who'd never earned it. It wasn't just the will anymore. This had been going on for years, under the surface, behind my back. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had actively used me. Used my silence, my distance, my independence as permission. I sat in my condo that night, lights off, staring out the window at the Denver skyline, and let the weight of it settle in. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't passive. They had chosen Daniel, again and again, and every time they did, they made sure to carve a little more of me out of the picture. I drove to their house without calling. I didn't want to give them a chance to prepare a script. I walked in with a folder in my hand, sat down at the kitchen table, same seat where I'd been handed that rent invoice years ago, and placed the documents in front of them. The will. The trust. The bank records. No words at first, just paper and silence. My dad glanced at them, then at me, confused. My mom picked one up, flipping through it slowly, eyes narrowing as the pieces clicked. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice tight. "Does it matter?" I replied. "You used my inheritance to gamble on Daniel. And you didn't even tell me." My dad leaned back in his chair and sighed, like I'd just brought up something too petty to be worth his energy. "Ethan, come on. You're doing fine. You've got your career, your place. Daniel needed it more." My mom chimed in, her tone soft but rehearsed. "We just wanted to give your brother a chance. You're the strong one, always have been." I stared at them, letting the silence stretch. That was their whole justification? Because I'd figured things out, I no longer deserved anything? I wasn't a person, I was a backup plan. A safety net. A second option if their favorite son couldn't deliver. "You didn't even think I'd find out," I said quietly. That's the part that stings the most. Sophia walked in halfway through, phone in hand, mid-laugh. She stopped when she saw the papers on the table. "Oh God, what is this?" she asked, rolling her eyes. "Family court?" I looked at her and waited. She didn't sit. If this is about the trust or whatever, grow up, Ethan. Seriously. It's not that deep. Her voice was dipped in that same smugness I remembered from childhood. I stood up. You knew, didn't you? She hesitated just long enough for me to see it. I figured Dad had to pull some strings. Daniel was a mess. Then she shrugged, as if that excused everything. That shrug felt like a knife. I folded the folder shut, picked it up, and looked at all three of them. You chose your narrative. You chose who mattered. And now I'm choosing me. My mom started to speak, some plea already forming, but I shook my head. No. I'm done. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shaking. I was clear. Lighter. Like the truth had unchained me. I walked out of the house without slamming the door. I didn't need to. What needed to be said had been said. And the silence that followed me out said more than they ever had. It started with a voicemail from my aunt. Her voice was shaky, hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should even be telling me. I thought you should know, she said. Your parents' house, it's going into foreclosure. I played the message twice, just to be sure I heard it right. The house. Their house. The one they handed to Daniel like it was a gift wrapped in a bow. Gone. Or close to it. I hadn't spoken to any of them in weeks, not since the confrontation. I figured they were still pretending I didn't exist. But the moment things started to crumble, suddenly I was back in the rotation. Turns out, Daniel hadn't just burned through the trust money. He'd refinanced the house to fund another business idea, a gambling app, ironically enough. Except he wasn't just building it, he was also its most active user. Tens of thousands of dollars vanished through online betting platforms, all linked to new credit cards opened in his name. When the payments caught up, he started missing mortgage deadlines. Then he stopped paying altogether. No one noticed until the bank notice came in the mail, and by then, the damage was done. The golden boy had torched the golden home, and now the foundation was crumbling under them. That's when the calls started. My mom left a long voicemail, sobbing, asking me to come over. We're going to lose everything, Ethan. Please, can't you just help us one more time? My dad followed up with a text that read more like a demand than a request. You're in a position to fix this. Don't be selfish. I didn't reply. Then came Sophia's message. I know we've had our issues, but you're the only one who can make this right. The irony almost made me laugh. They'd excluded me from their legacy, rewritten me out of their future, and now, with that future on fire, they were looking for the son they'd trained to survive. But I wasn't their safety net anymore. That title had expired the moment they decided I wasn't worth a mention in ink. I didn't ignore them because I was angry. I ignored them because I was done. When my mom called again, I let it ring. When my dad texted, I left it on read. Eventually, I sent one message, just one. You made your choices. I'm making mine. No. That was it. No emotion. No explanations. No second chances. I wasn't lashing out. I wasn't punishing them. I was just finally living by the rules they'd written, survive on your own. That's what they taught me. And that's what I was doing. Only now, they were the ones left out in the cold. A few hours later, my mom sent a string of messages. The first was a long paragraph, crying through text, we're your parents. We raised you. How can you be so heartless? The second came from my dad, short and sharp, you're dead to us. No hesitation. No pause. Just a sentence that felt like a punch, and a relief. For years, I'd fought to prove I was worth something to them. Now they'd handed me their answer. If drawing a boundary meant exile, so be it. I didn't flinch. I didn't reply. I just blocked the number. Then came Sophia. She didn't message me directly, she went public. A Facebook post, dripping with passive aggression. Some people forget what family means. Some people only care about money. Sad what success does to people's hearts. The comments poured in. Family, friends, distant relatives, old neighbors chiming in about how kids these days have no respect. She never mentioned my name, but everyone knew who she meant. I could have replied. Could have posted the will, the trust records, the receipts. But I didn't. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. The truth didn't need a stage. It just needed space to breathe. And in that space, I found something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Real, bone-deep stillness. No buzzing phone. No guilt gnawing at the back of my mind. No desperate need to be seen. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I realized something simple and powerful. I didn't owe them closure. I didn't owe them rescue. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn a seat at their table. But now, I had my own table. And I finally understood, I wasn't missing out. I was finally free. I stayed quiet for as long as I could. I watched their online pity parade from the sidelines, Sophia painting herself as the selfless daughter, my parents playing the wounded elders abandoned by their ungrateful son. At first, I told myself to let it go. Don't stoop to their level. But then I thought about the people who might believe them. The cousins I hadn't seen in years. The neighbors who watched me grow up. People who deserve the truth, not the carefully edited version my parents were broadcasting. So I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and started typing. Calm. Direct. No rage. No insults. Just facts. And this time, I didn't hold back. I attached screenshots of the will, where my name didn't appear once. I posted the trust documents, the paper trail showing the full liquidation of my share to fund Daniel's failed business. I included the timeline, how I'd been asked to pay rent at 18 while my siblings lived for free, and how I'd walked away without asking for anything in return. I didn't add color. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. I ended the post with a simple message: I'm not seeking pity. Just clarity. I was erased. So I chose to write my own story instead. I hit post, closed my laptop, and went for a walk. The weight that lifted off my chest was almost physical. Within an hour, my inbox started flooding. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years reached out. I always wondered why you weren't around. I'm so sorry. One of Sophia's close friends messaged me. She told a very different story. The biggest shock came 3 days later. Her fiancé broke off the engagement. Turns out, he'd seen the post, asked her about it, and she lied. When he found out the truth, he walked away. I didn't gloat. I didn't even respond. That wasn't the point. It had never been about revenge. It was about setting the record straight and letting go. And that's exactly what happened. Not revenge. Not vindication. Just release. There was no cinematic finale, no dramatic apology at my door. Just silence. But this time, it felt different. It felt earned. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. I wasn't chasing love anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I had laid it all bare, not for attention, but for myself. And now that it was out there, I could breathe without the past pressing against my ribs. For the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten son. I felt like someone who had finally remembered himself. Some nights, I still think about that kitchen table, the worn wood, the faded placemats, the sound of my dad's chair scraping against the floor. I remember sitting there with a rent invoice in one hand and a paper plate of birthday cake in the other, wondering how love could look so transactional. I think about the cold garage I moved into, the dinners I skipped, the nights I studied by lamplight while my siblings lounged at home. And then I think about the view from my condo now. It's not a mansion, not a palace. But it's warm. It's quiet. And every single square foot of it belongs to someone who built it on his own terms. I've learned that blood doesn't entitle anyone to your energy. That being the strong one doesn't mean being the one who absorbs everyone else's damage. And that silence, while noble, is not the same as peace. I'm not raising kids yet, but if I ever do, they won't have to earn their place at my table. I won't reward silence and punish strength. I won't teach them that love is conditional, or that they have to break themselves to be seen. I'll celebrate the loud ones, the quiet ones, the messy ones, all the same. Because the moment a child has to question their worth in a family, that's the moment the family fails. Cycles repeat when no one's brave enough to end them. And sometimes, breaking the cycle looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like letting the silence stay silent instead of filling it with more apology. But most of all, it looks like choosing yourself even when no one else ever did. I didn't walk away because I stopped caring. I walked away because they never started. And now that I've put down what was never mine to carry, I can finally start moving forward, lighter, clearer, and finally, whole. If your family treated you like a burden, would you save them when they're sinking? Would you throw yourself back into the fire for people who handed you the matches in the first place? Or would you finally step away, not out of spite, but out of self-respect? That's the question I had to face. And maybe it's the one you're facing now. When love is conditional, and loyalty only flows one way, what do you really owe the people who call themselves family? If this story struck a chord, I'd love to hear yours. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever had to walk away from family to find peace? What did it cost you, and what did it give back? Let's talk about it. Let's stop pretending that family always means love, and start telling the truth about what it takes to heal and what it means to be free. There's something strange about peace after chaos. It doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels like silence, and this time, that silence is yours. I didn't get the apology I deserved. I didn't get the recognition, the acknowledgement, or the we were wrong. But I got clarity. I got truth. I got to finally put down the weight of trying to matter to people who only noticed me when they needed something. And that clarity? It's worth more than any inheritance they could have left behind. So if you're the strong one, the quiet one, the forgotten one, the one who's always holding it together while no one thanks you for it, this is your reminder: you matter. Not because of what you give, or what you sacrifice, or what you endure, but because of who you are. Sometimes, being the strong one just means you were forced to carry what others wouldn't. But you don't have to carry it forever. The moment you choose yourself, you don't just reclaim your peace. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you. Every voice matters, yours included. When we share stories of quiet strength and difficult choices, we remind others that they're not alone. That walking away from pain isn't weakness, it's healing. That choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. So if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it their way. Let's build a space where courage is celebrated, not silenced. Together, we can create a world where everyone's dignity is recognized and respected.